Hey everyone. On the story for today. I raised my wife's kids as my own, until they said I was just some guy, so I walked away. I've always believed in a few core things: working hard for what you have, taking responsibility for your actions, and being loyal to the people you care about. I also learned, the hard way, mind you, that loving the wrong people can really mess you up. This whole story I'm about to tell you, it's about how those beliefs of mine got tested, and how everything I thought I knew about family came crashing down. It's not a happy story, to be honest. It's about getting taken advantage of, about being used, and about finally realizing when enough is enough. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm going to tell it like it happened, because I think it's important to be real about these things. We often hear about happy endings, but sometimes, the ending is just, well, an ending. And sometimes, that's okay. It's necessary, even. I'm not trying to be some kind of saint here. I made mistakes. I was probably too trusting to believe in the best in people. I ignored some red flags, and I paid the price. But I also learned a lot. So, how did this all begin? It started with a woman named Amelia. She was a widow. Her husband, a military officer, had passed away. She had 2 young kids, a little boy named Daniel, who was around 4 years old and full of energy, and a baby girl named Mia, who was just barely starting to walk. I met them through a mutual friend, and I could see right away that Amelia was struggling. It wasn't just that she was sad, although of course she was. It was more than that. She was completely exhausted. I mean, visibly exhausted. You could see it in the way she carried herself, in the dark circles under her eyes, in the way she seemed to be running on fumes. It wasn't just an I'm tired kind of exhaustion, it was a deep, bone-weary kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. I didn't step in because I felt obligated or anything like that. It wasn't some kind of knight in shining armor complex. It was just I saw her, really saw her. I saw her struggling, and I wanted to help. I wanted to make things a little bit easier for her and those kids. I felt this genuine desire to provide some stability, some support, in their lives. I started helping out, little things at first. Offering to watch the kids so she could get a nap, running errands, that sort of thing. But it quickly became more. I found myself wanting to be a father figure to those kids. Their own dad was gone, and I felt like I could step into that role, not to replace him, of course, but to give them the love and support that every child deserves. I guess you could say I was contrasting my own values, hard work, responsibility, loyalty, with the situation they were in. I wanted to give them what their father couldn't, not because I had to, but because I genuinely wanted to. It felt right. It felt like the start of something good, something real. And for a long time, it was good. I really threw myself into it. I worked long hours, not just to pay the bills, but to make sure those kids had everything they needed. Good schools, nice clothes, a comfortable home, plenty of food on the table, all of it. I made it a priority to put their needs above my own. I wasn't just trying to meet their basic needs either. I wanted to erase any sense of loss they might have felt because their dad wasn't around. I wanted to fill that void, to make them feel secure and loved. It wasn't just about the material things, though. I was there for them emotionally, too. I went to every single school event, every soccer game, every play. I cheered the loudest, I was their biggest fan. I organized birthday parties, planned family vacations, did all the dad things. And they responded. They loved me back. They called me Dad. Not just Thomas, but Dad. And you know what? I believed it. I really did. I felt like the luckiest man alive. I thought I had created this genuine, loving family. I was so caught up in the idea of it, in the desire for it to be true, that I didn't see the cracks that were starting to form. I was so focused on building this perfect picture that I ignored the warning signs. Looking back, I can see that I was building on a foundation that wasn't as solid as I thought it was. But at the time, I was all in. I was invested, heart and soul. I was dedicated to making this work, to being the best father figure I could be. I poured everything I had into it, and for a while, it seemed like it was paying off. We had our routines, our traditions, our inside jokes. We were a family. I was sure. That feeling is what kept me going. The first signs of trouble were small, almost insignificant. Little comments from the kids, a bit of backtalk, a roll of the eyes here and there. Nothing major, nothing you wouldn't expect from kids growing up. I brushed it off. I told myself it was just typical teenage stuff, a phase they were going through. I didn't want to see it as anything more than that. I remember one time, Daniel, he must have been around 13 or 14, made some snarky comment about how I wasn't cool because I didn't let him stay out late. Mia, who was a few years younger, chimed in with some equally disrespectful remark. It stung a little, but I just laughed it off. I told myself they were just testing boundaries, pushing limits, like all teenagers do. As the kids got older, the disrespect became more pronounced. Daniel, by the time he was 17, was a full-blown teenager. He started ignoring curfews, dismissing any advice I offered, and generally acting like he was entitled to do whatever he wanted. It was classic teenage rebellion, I suppose, but it felt different, sharper somehow. There was a meanness to it that I couldn't ignore. Mia, who was around 14 at this point, started mimicking her brother's behavior. She'd roll her eyes at me, ignore my instructions, and dismiss any concerns I raised. They formed this united front against me, making it clear that they didn't respect my authority, or me, for that matter. It was like they were ganging up on me, testing how far they could push me. What made it worse was Amelia's reaction, or rather, her lack of reaction. She wouldn't intervene. She wouldn't back me up. She'd just sit there, usually on her phone, pretending not to notice what was going on. Sometimes, she'd even subtly undermine me. Maybe she'd pretend to be distracted with her phone, or she'd sigh like I was the one being unreasonable. It wasn't just passive, it was almost like she was actively encouraging their behavior. Oh, they're just tired, or they're going through a phase, or we need to keep the peace. It was always something. But what it really was a pattern of enabling their disrespect. She was letting them get away with it, and in doing so, she was eroding my authority and making me feel increasingly isolated. I started to feel like I was the only one who cared about setting boundaries, about teaching them right from wrong. I was starting to question Amelia's motives. Was she really this oblivious, or was she deliberately undermining me? I had my first real wake-up call around this time, but I still didn't fully grasp what was happening. The real breaking point, the moment when everything started to fall apart, happened one night. Daniel came home way past his curfew. I'm talking hours late, and he hadn't called or texted or anything. I was worried sick, of course, but when he finally strolled in, he acted like it was no big deal. I asked him, calmly I might add, where he had been. Just a simple question, wanting some accountability. He didn't even look at me. He just said, "Relax, I'm not a kid." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a dismissive brush off. And then, he said, "You're not my real dad. Stop acting like you own me." Just like that, all those years of love and care and support, thrown back in my face. It was like a punch to the gut. Mia, who was standing there, chimed in, "Yeah, you're just some guy Mom married." As if all the years we'd spent together, all the memories we'd made, meant absolutely nothing. Something inside me just broke. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was more like a profound sense of disillusionment. And the worst part? Amelia didn't say a word. She just stood there silent. Her silence was the ultimate betrayal. It confirmed everything I had been starting to suspect, that I was nothing more than a convenience to them, a provider, someone to take care of the things their real dad couldn't. It was the defining moment. The moment I realized that the family I thought I had built was a lie. It wasn't long after that first incident that had happened again. This time, it was Mia. She had made a mess in the kitchen, and I asked her to clean it up. Simple enough, right? Basic responsibility. But instead of doing it, she just looked at me and said, "Why don't you do it? It's your house, isn't it?" That stung. It wasn't just the disrespect, it was the way she said it, like I was some kind of servant, like my only purpose was to clean up after them. It highlighted my outsider status, reducing me to nothing more than a provider, a cleaner. It was a deliberate attempt to belittle me, to make me feel small. And then Daniel, as if on cue, chimed in again with the same line, "You're not even our real dad." It was like they were tag-teaming me, reinforcing their rejection, making sure I understood my place, or rather, my lack of place, in their lives. But this time, it was Amelia's reaction that really sealed the deal. She didn't yell, didn't get angry. She just looked at me, casually, without even looking up from her phone, and said, "They have a point, Thomas. Maybe you should back off." That was it. That was the moment I knew it was over. It wasn't just the children's disrespect anymore, it was Amelia's explicit agreement with them. She was siding with them against me, the person who had dedicated years of his life to caring for them. It wasn't a moment of anger or even hurt, not really. It was a moment of clarity. I finally understood. I was done. There was no going back. This wasn't a family, it was a sham. And I was finally ready to walk away. It was a quiet realization, a calm acceptance of the truth. I was no longer fighting to hold on to something that wasn't real. I was ready to let go. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I stopped. I stopped giving, stopped caring, stopped trying. It wasn't a sudden, impulsive decision. It was a deliberate, conscious choice. I just withdrew. I stopped providing for them. No more rides, no more allowances, no more protection, no more advice, no more concern. I let them experience the consequences of their own actions. It was a complete 180 from how I had been for years. I had always been there for them, no matter what. Now I was gone. It hurt, I won't lie. It went against every instinct I had. I had invested so much of myself in this family, and it was incredibly painful to just walk away, but I knew it was necessary. I had to protect myself. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew they would react, that they would try to push back. But I was prepared for that. I had reached my limit. I had given them everything I had, and they had thrown it back in my face. I was done being the doormat. At first they laughed. They mocked me, made sarcastic comments, smirked at me whenever I walked by. They thought they had won. They thought they didn't need me. They were relying on Amelia, thinking she could provide everything I had been providing. They were wrong. They'd make these little jabs, mimicking my instructions, making fun of the way I used to try to set boundaries. They'd say things like, "Oh, are we breaking the rules?" with this exaggerated emphasis, rolling their eyes and smirking at each other. It was like they were trying to provoke me, to get a reaction out of me. Amelia, oh, she made sure to pick up my slack. She funded their little shopping trips, made sure their weekends were still filled with fast food outings and unnecessary spending. She kept them comfortable, kept them cocky, and kept feeding them the idea that they didn't need me. But I knew it wouldn't last. I knew Amelia's resources were limited. She didn't have the kind of income one did. She couldn't keep up that level of spending forever. So I remained quiet. I let them have their fun. I let them think they were getting away with it. I knew the reality check was coming. I didn't engage. I didn't argue. I didn't react. I just observed, silently, waiting for the inevitable. It was a strange kind of patience, born out of the certainty that I was right. I knew their arrogance was built on a shaky foundation, and I knew that foundation would eventually crumble. I just had to wait it out. It was a waiting game. And then, slowly but surely, things started to change. The shopping trips became less frequent. The fast food outings became fewer and farther between. New clothes stopped appearing. Small changes at first, but noticeable. Then, bigger problems started to arise. School fees became a concern. Daniel got into some trouble at school, and Amelia didn't know how to handle it. Mia broke her phone, and there was no money to fix it. I remember the first morning Daniel missed the ride I used to give him to school. He'd always taken it for granted, never even bothering to say thank you most of the time. Now, he was on his own. He ended up having to run for the bus, and from what I heard, he barely made it, huffing and puffing and completely out of breath. It's a small thing, I know, but it was symbolic. It was the first real crack in their comfortable world. And I'll admit, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Not joy, not exactly, but a quiet vindication. I knew what it was like to struggle, to have to work for everything you have. I remembered those days when I was young, having to hustle to make ends meet. They, on the other hand, always had everything handed to them. I didn't say anything, of course. I just watched. I saw the frustration on Mia's face when she realized her broken phone wasn't going to be magically replaced. I heard her complaining to Amelia, and I heard Amelia's increasingly flimsy excuses. She was starting to run out of money, and she was starting to realize that she couldn't provide everything I had. That same day, Mia had a complete meltdown, whining about how unfair it was that she couldn't get her phone fixed. Amelia finally admitted, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, that she didn't have the money right then. It was a small admission, but it was a significant one. It was the first time she had openly acknowledged the limitations of her resources. It was the beginning of the end of their denial. The reality of their situation was starting to sink in. They were starting to understand that their privileged lifestyle had been dependent on me, on the person they had so readily dismissed and disrespected. The free ride was over, and they were finally starting to feel the bumps in the road. It was a harsh awakening, but a necessary one. My absence was making its presence felt. It wasn't long after the phone incident that Amelia finally confronted me. She was angry, of course. She accused me of being childish, of neglecting my responsibilities. That word, responsibilities, stuck with me. It revealed how she truly saw me, not as a partner, not as a father figure, but as someone who had obligations to fulfill, a provider, a walking ATM. She went on, blaming me for everything that was going wrong. She said I was abandoning them, that I was being selfish, that I wasn't acting like a man. She tried to make me feel guilty, to make me feel like I was the bad guy. It was all projection, of course. She was deflecting her own failures onto me. I let her rant. I let her get it all out. And then, when she finally paused for breath, I asked her a simple question. I asked her why she had never defended me, why she had always sided with the children, even when they were being disrespectful. I asked her why she had allowed them to treat me the way they did. And that's when it happened. That's when the truth finally came out. She sneered and said, "Because I agree with them, Thomas. You were never really their father." It was like a slap in the face, but it was also a confirmation of everything I had suspected. But it didn't stop there. She went further. She actually admitted that she had told the children not to let me control them. "I told them not to let you control them," she said. "I raised them alone before you. And I can do it again." That was the real kicker. It wasn't just passive inaction, it was deliberate, long-term undermining. She had actively encouraged their disrespect, poisoned their minds against me. Daniel and Mia were standing in the hallway, watching the whole thing. Arms crossed, smug little looks on their faces. It was like they were enjoying the show. And in that moment I thought, this is it. This is who they really are. Not the sweet, innocent children I had tried to love and care for, but spoiled, entitled brats, enabled by their manipulative mother. Despite the pain, despite the betrayal, I felt a sense of relief. It was over. The charade was finished. I had my answer. There was no ambiguity, no room for doubt. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had made the right decision to walk away. The truth was ugly, but it was also liberating. I was finally free. But things got worse before they got better. The kids, fueled by Amelia's anger and their own sense of entitlement, started acting out even more. It started with small things. My personal belongings would go missing. Then, some of my important work files disappeared from my computer. I started to suspect they were messing with me, but I didn't have any proof. Then, it escalated. One morning, I found my car keyed, a long, deep scratch running down the side. That was when I knew I had to do something. I installed security cameras, discreetly, inside and around the house. I didn't tell anyone, not even Amelia. I just wanted to gather evidence. And I got it. A few days later, I caught them on camera, Daniel and Mia, in my closet. They were laughing, tearing up my clothes, shredding them with scissors. It was a deliberate act of vandalism. I didn't confront them. I didn't yell or scream. I just kept quiet. I documented everything. I saved the video footage. I took photos of the damage. I gathered all the threatening texts they had sent me, all the evidence of their escalating hostility. I was playing along, letting them think they were winning, while I was secretly preparing for my departure. I knew I needed to protect myself, not just emotionally, but legally. I knew this was going to get ugly, and I wanted to be prepared. I was building my case, gathering the ammunition I would need to fight back, if it came to that. It was a sad and pathetic situation, but I was determined to handle it with as much dignity and composure as I could muster. I was not going to stoop to their level. I was going to be smart, strategic, and silent. The next step was seeing a lawyer. I explained the whole situation, showed him all the evidence I had gathered. He listened patiently, nodding occasionally, and when I was finished, he assured me that I had a strong case. We discussed divorce, and he even suggested a restraining order, given the escalating hostility of the children. I also filed a police report about the property damage. It felt strange, reporting my stepchildren to the police, but I knew it was necessary. I needed to create an official record of their behavior, to protect myself from any future accusations or legal challenges. It was another step in the process of severing ties, of disentangling myself from this toxic situation. Then, one afternoon, while Amelia and the kids were out, I packed a bag. I didn't take much, just the essentials, the things that really mattered to me. I left everything else behind, the furniture, the appliances, all the material possessions I had accumulated over the years. They weren't important. What was important was my freedom, my peace of mind. I left an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside were the divorce papers, along with copies of all the supporting documents, the police report, the photos of the damage, the screenshots of the threatening texts. It was a formal act of separation. There was no going back. I walked out of that house, and I didn't look back. I got in my car, the one with the long scratch down the side, and I drove away. I didn't have a plan, not really. I just knew I needed to get out, to escape the toxic environment I had been living in. The final step was financial. I closed all the joint accounts, removed Amelia's access to my funds. It was a harsh move, I know, but it was necessary. I had to cut off her ability to continue supporting the children's entitled behavior. I had to make it clear that the gravy train had stopped. It was the final severing of ties, the ultimate act of withdrawal. It was over. As expected, Amelia went ballistic. She called me repeatedly, leaving furious voicemails, accusing me of being a coward, of abandoning them, of being a terrible person. She claimed she could manage without me, that she didn't need my money, that she would be better off without me. It was all bluster, of course. She was in denial, refusing to accept the reality of the situation. I didn't answer her calls. I didn't respond to her texts. I just blocked her number. I refused to engage in any further conflict. I had said my piece, I had taken my stand, and I was done. I needed to focus on my own well-being, on building a new life for myself. Then, the children started messaging me. At first, it was the same kind of casual, arrogant messages they had been sending before. But gradually, the tone changed. They started to sound worried, even regretful. They apologized for their behavior, admitted that things were difficult, that they were struggling without my support. Finally, I received a message from Mia, the younger one. It was just 3 words, "I miss you." It was a significant shift. But it was too late. The damage was done. The trust was broken. I couldn't go back, even if I wanted to. I remained silent. I didn't respond. I recognized their regret, but I stood firm in my decision. I had learned a painful lesson, and I wasn't going to repeat my mistakes. I had given them everything I had, and they had thrown it back in my face. I was done. My silence was my answer. It was my way of saying, you made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. So, that's my story. It's not a pretty one, but it's a real one. And I learned some valuable lessons from it. The biggest one? Never, ever let people take you for granted. Never beg for respect. Never waste your energy on people who don't value you. And when you're being used, when you're being disrespected, walk away. Don't hesitate. Don't look back. It's a hard lesson to learn. And it's even harder to put into practice. But it's essential for your own well-being, for your own self-respect. You deserve to be treated with kindness, with respect, with love. And if you're not getting that, you have the right, the obligation, to walk away. Some people only realize your value once you're gone, and by then, it's too late. It's a sad truth, but it's a truth nonetheless. Don't wait for them to realize your worth. Know your worth yourself, and act accordingly. It's not about being selfish. It's about being self-aware. It's about protecting your heart, your mind, and your soul. Thanks for reading Reddit. I hope my story can help someone out there who might be going through something similar. Remember, you're not alone, and you deserve to be happy. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Choose yourself. Well, folks, that will be all for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay safe, everyone.